Hello, how y'all doing? This is Mongo Slate. Early start time of 8:30. Instead of starting at 9 o'clock, I started at 8:30. Welcome to anybody who wants to dip in. So today we will be talking about Afro Samurai. We're going to talk about the manga, the anime, and the movie, which are three different versions of the same story. The movie version is sort more of a continuance of the anime, using some elements that come from the manga. So we're going to talk about all three of those. We'll see how long this takes. And then after that, we will dabble into whatever you guys want to talk about. I want to be wrapped up by 11 o'clock, however, which is why I'm starting at 8:30. I don't expect a lot of engagement here. Afro Samurai is a property that a lot of people are not that familiar with, mainly because it's so old. Uh, the manga started in 1998. It ended in 2002. The anime was actually in, I think, 2007, and the movie came out in 2009. So it wasn't until this year that they reissued the manga. And it was the reissuing of the manga which gave me the opportunity to actually read the manga. And that's why I'm doing this today. For a lot of people, they say Afro Samurai, they probably haven't heard of it in a long, long time. It is a very short anime series you could probably finish in one day. It's literally 5 episodes. And the movie is 110 minutes, which is a little under 2 hours. So it is but it's simple, you know. Simplicity in storytelling is something that is often overlooked, and it's often something that people look at as a negative. All right, WG Phil, Lord Kratos, hello. Everybody else who's going to stumble on in, I wish you all a good Sunday. Hope you guys had a pretty good Sunday. We in this joint. so, again, we're talking about Afro Samurai, a story which can be wrapped up in a single sentence. You know, what is Afro Samurai about? It is a revenge story. Um, that being said, it was it's incredibly fun. For me, it's along the same lines of I know our good buddy Black saying he's a big fan of Devil May Cry. It's a lot like Devil May Cry in so much as that it's simplistic. It's so simplistic, but it makes it up in style. Afro Samurai is incredibly stylistic, and we're gonna have you have to see it for yourself. Like I can't show clips. I'm not that sophisticated. I can't show clips or anything like that. But you have to experience the anime for yourself in order to see it, see how beautiful it is. Um, but as a story, it's not deep at all. There's still some pretty good themes to it. We're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about a little bit about the creator. We're going to talk about each individual version of this, and then we'll get to what you guys might want to talk about. Bishop Marley says I liked it very much back in the day, but I don't remember it that well. I know I love the art style, and Afro seemed like a really cool character. Afro Samurai is incredibly simple. Afro himself is minimized quite a bit in the series. It's so much about the world around him because he has a singular focus. Afro Samurai is the perfect, what you would call stereotype for what we call the warrior archetype. You know, I should have prepared a little bit better, uh, defining what the warrior archetype is, but I've done videos on character progression and stuff like that, so maybe some of that stuff will come back up eventually. But I'll get to that when we start talking about Afro as a character and the people around him. Um, so Bishop Marley says, "I love simple narratives that hold great emotional weight. Those are the best kind," and that is what Afro Samurai is. Afro Samurai is incredibly emotional, but it's very simple. There's nothing extra, no added, no real twists to the Afro Samurai universe. Have I seen the trailer for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 30th anniversary? Absolutely not. And to be quite honest, it'll be weird to watch it, and knowing that. So, well, I don't know how many people are dead from that show. At least two or three, right? But let's get into Afro Samurai real quick. So first, we're gonna talk about the creator. The creator, his name is Okazaki Takashi. So there in the manga, there is in the reissue of the manga comes from Titan, which is the comic book organization here in the United States. I believe I read the foreword for you guys before, but if I have not, I'm going to read the foreword again, and then we're also going to read a little bit from an interview he did in the previous reissuing of the anime, which I think was a, um, a version for a magazine or something like that. But I'm going to read the idea behind Afro Samurai. So Takashi says this: when I was just starting out as an illustrator, I was frustrated by the lack of opportunities. It was 1998, and I was rolling around with illustrators of the same age who were in a similar situation. So I thought, well then, let's just spend our own money and draw what we want to draw. That's when I started the Joujinshi magazine, No Hall. Back then, opportunities to showcase my art on social media or the internet were limited, so I published my work in print at my own expense. We didn't have a lot of money, so we were all having to work part-time as well. So it's an interesting thing that we're having a conversation right now about fairness in contracts, especially on the sort of right-wing political sphere, about contracts and what's fair. So you're talking about this guy in 1998 who he didn't really have much, and he says, like, look, we had a lack of opportunities. We had to spend our own money. Now we know how mangaka work today, and people talk about how the mangaka and all of the assistants, how they're worked hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work. And that is true. But it does, we've seen it become incredible successes like with One Piece or Dragon Ball or I forget the name of the creator for Attack on Titan. I got right here. It is Hajime Asayama. So Hasayama, he created Attack on Titan and literally nothing else. And he did an interview in New York City recently where he says he has no plans to create another manga. Attack on Titan was it. He made enough money off Attack on Titan that he does not need to work again, ever. And that tells you that going into debt, that working hard for yourself, busting your own ass, you can get it done. Pretty much, Okazaki, I've never heard of him doing anything else other than Afro Samurai. That could tell you a lot about success if you really put in the effort. And it is very grueling. Bishop Marley is correct. The manga schedules are grueling because sometimes that stuff is weekly. It has to be put out weekly. So let's continue his story. He says, quote, Afro Samurai was born from a doodle I used to draw when I was an art student. At first, the characters were more pop and illustrative, but I was really into the U.S. TV show Soul Train from the 70s at the time. And Don Cornelius and the Soul Train gang were really cool. So I thought, I'll draw a cool afro. So the idea was born from love for that show. Now again, this guy, I don't know how old he was in 1998 when the manga started, but he's getting ideas from the 1970s. I'm guessing he was probably young enough or old at the time to have seen it, but who knows how popular Soul Train was in Japan. So it's still very cool to think that something that's a cultural phenomenon here in the United States. And I was recently talking to people about the importance of Soul Train and how so many people kind of forget that it existed. But look what Soul Train brought us. He says, quote, he continues, I wanted to create work that was my own, without being bound to any specific influences. Although inspiration came from everywhere, from Star Wars to The Prisoner, and not just movies and manga, but music in general, and especially hip-hop. So this is where Afro Samurai really joins Cowboy Bebop and Samurai Champloo which almost, well, I think Bebop was a little bit before it, but an Afro Samurai might have been on the air at the same time as Samurai Champloo, but Champloo is a much longer show. But with the black influence, there's incredible black influence in those three anime. It's almost a perfect fusion of Japan and hip hop. Afro Samurai took it to the next level, of course, by having actually a black main character. While there are incredible hip hop elements in Samurai Champloo, none of the characters are meant to be African or black or anything like that. But though they beatbox, they break dance. Some of them, even some characters on the show, are wacky and they rap. It's when you look at something like Afro Samurai, the main character is black, but his race is never mentioned. It is never mentioned in the manga, in the anime, or the movie that Afro is black. It is never mentioned, ever, anywhere. There is not even a mistreatment of Afro based on how he looks. No, that is not a part of the story at all. And the hip hop influences really come in when we start talking about the anime. But this is where you get like the guy who did Nujabes, who did the soundtrack for Samurai Champloo. He was really inspired by Jay Dilla, and he's sort of known as the Dilla of Japan to a degree. So you see that fusion of when it comes to Cowboy Bebop, it's jazz. There's a lot of jazz music in the soundtrack. It is most people. It's better in English than it is in Japanese. It's a fantastic show. Samurai Champloo is similar. A lot of hip hop, even though it's Japanese hip hop, it's better in English than it is in Japanese. Samurai Champloo is excellent. Same thing can be said for Afro Samurai. Afro Samurai was actually made in English, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later. That this is how far Takashi went, in so much as making this show, is that he wanted to be as Western as possible. So he continues. While drawing Afro Samurai, I was listening to Jay Dilla, Pete Rock, Nas, Gang Starr, Black Star, Wu-Tang Clan, Marley Marl, A Tribe Called Quest, Slum Village, Public Enemy, DJ Jazzy Jeff, Madlib, too many to list to name. He said, seeing Do the Right Thing when I was in high school also had a huge impact on me. It was both a shocking and great movie in many ways, but there were things that most Japanese high school students didn't understand or appreciate. I liked hip hop before that, but it was this movie that got me interested in its culture and historical background. So, how many of you have seen Do the Right Thing? Do the Right Thing is a movie seemingly with no plot. All right, if you go and watch Do the Right Thing, it is given a lot of credit to as being the movie that made Spike Lee famous, but the movie really doesn't have much of a plot. It kind of centers around a deadbeat dad character, and it ends in a race riot. And you're kind of questioning, how did we get there? But it's sort of it's an important cultural story because it goes to show you how things can jump off. And it was interesting. Now, I do like Do the Right Thing. I don't think it's the best Spike Lee movie ever made. I think that he made better movies after that. Hell, I think he made better movies before that. But Do the Right Thing struck the right note among a certain class of people, basically the white liberals, who really, really loved the black victim narrative that was told in Do the Right Thing. It was very diverse, and so much that in Do the Right Thing, Spike Lee's character had a Puerto Rican girlfriend. The actress name, it slips my mind right now. She has a very annoying voice. It was very New York. So it's very centered in urban New York, which most of Spike Lee's movies, in fact, I think all of them are centered mostly in New York and in the black urban experience. So you got Takashi Okazaki, who's watching black American movies, watching black American TV shows, listening to urban black American music, and yet when he writes Afro Samurai, it features none of that. Yeah, Rosie Perez, that's her name. her name just, I haven't said her name in forever, but yeah, Rosie Perez. She was the girlfriend in Do the Right Thing. The mother of his child, whom he never really saw or never really got to see. It's an interesting movie, to say the least, but the movie really doesn't have much of a plot. Try to explain it to people who've never seen it, and they'll say, "What the hell is this movie about?" But it's interesting that he was thinking about these black people, but he never utilized any of it. There's no dancing, no rapping, nothing in Afro Samurai. Let's go back into this thing. He says filmmakers such as Kenji Misumi, Akira Kurosawa, Alejandro Jodorowsky, and Sergio Leone were big influences. But it was a Panasonic TV commercial from 1988 with George Lucas that was strangely made the biggest impression. The end line was, quote, always something new. That became my motto. He says, the idea of blending a historical setting with futuristic elements came from my childhood love of period dramas, which I always saw as vivid fantasies. Rather than just the past being vaguely connected to the present, my thinking was strongly influenced by the art of the samurai and wizardry, Dungeons and Dragons, and the fighting fantasy game books. So in my mind, the world of science fiction and historical drama naturally merged. So, Afro Samurai features a lot of, and this, you see this a lot in Japan, where they'll have this mishmash of past and future. For instance, they walk around in traditional Japanese clothing, the kimonos with the sandals and all that stuff. At the same time, though, there are guns in this show. There are cyborgs, people whose bodies or brains are in robot bodies. The primary weapon of everybody on the show, with the exception of only a few people, are swords, which of course is Japanese historical weapons. Of course, he's a samurai above everything, so he's a wanderer. Well, you'll get into a little bit of that in a moment. But Japan is really good for doing this, creating those sort of mixtures of past and future, which is actually very cool. He continues, and the coolest characters always seem to be the lone warrior or samurai archetype. And I guess that my favorites, such as Sweetback, Badass Song, all came together in my head to create this ideal Afro character. We talked about Sweetback's Badass Song when I talked about this earlier. It was one of the first black movies that was directed by a black man. I think he funded it himself. This would be Melvin Van Peebles. I wasn't a big fan of the movie myself. I wasn't really a big fan of Sweetback. A lot of those blaxploitation movies from like the 70s and stuff like that have an obscene amount of sex in them. Not that I'm a Puritan or anything like that, but it's really a difficult thing to watch. And I believe this is one of those movies where he was having sex with, like, as a kid, he was having sex with older women, which I know was a thing. And there are stories about, James Brown and, Richard Pryor having that sort of lifestyle when they were children. And there is, being raised in a brothel, which I think is the very beginning of Sweetback. That's how he got the name Sweetback. Is that, he was raised in a brothel, having sex with all of these different women. And then his life kind of goes off the rails a little bit later, and he ends up running from the cops and all this kind of stuff, which is kind of, I guess you could say, stereotypical. But one day maybe I'll do a digging in on just Sweetback's Badass Song, because Huey Newton wrote a lot about Sweetback's Badass Song, and he talked a lot about the movie. And Newton is one of the, not a big fan of him today, because that's one of the things I've changed my mind on, is the Black Panther Party, but I still have quite a few of his, the 2 books that he wrote. Anyway, let's go into this. And he says, I had no idea what he'd become. I just created what I wanted to see. I never thought that something so personal would be enjoyed by so many people. And I feel so fortunate that so many have embraced it. Quote, always something new. I did what I wanted to do for fun without thinking about it. Afro Samurai is perceived differently in Japan, where it's only known by those familiar with anime and manga, as opposed to overseas, where it sits alongside other major titles. So I hope this work has triggered an interest in Japanese culture and helps show that manga and anime are not just for kids, but can be gateways to an incredibly deep and diverse universe that becomes even more interesting the deeper you dig. And as a creator, it is my greatest joy to have work that genuinely depicts something I love accepted by people all over the world. To have Samuel L. Jackson and RZA's approval is the greatest thrill. Now think about that, where this Japanese guy, who probably never saw a black person outside of a television, he's like, oh my God, Samuel L. Jackson thinks I'm cool, or likes the character, or likes what I'm doing. RZA, who, does a lot of sampling of Eastern kung fu movies and stuff like this, he already has an appreciation for Asian cultures. He thinks that I'm cool, that I'm doing something right. Juxtapose that position to how people treat each other, that cultural exchange today, that cultural appropriation garbage that you hear so much about. You know, this guy, and most of the time when I see Japanese people, they're usually thrilled that other people who are not Japanese are interested in Japanese culture, as opposed to black people in the United States who, you want to complain because a white man has dreadlocks. This is something that happened in Tulsa King, right? You had a black character in Tulsa King giving white people a hard time for having dreadlocks, or the white guy's name is Bodie, so we got to give him a hard time about that. Just it's stupid. You see, black rappers saying that they don't make music for white people. I believe it was I forget what her name was. You guys probably her name is No Name, actually. Her name is No Name, and she went on a rampage on Twitter once talking. Well, I saw No Name in concert. I think she was brought in by Lauryn Hill when I went to a Lauryn Hill concert with my girlfriend a couple of years ago. That was the first time I ever saw her. I went and downloaded her mixtape. She got a song about abortion that is really appalling. But she became popular because she's one of these spoken word style rappers. And she went on a Twitter tirade about how she's tired of seeing nothing but white people at her shows. She doesn't make music for white people. And it's very odd that these people have this sort of mentality where, the majority of the people who enjoy your work being white should tell you something. I remember Common had a similar concept. I believe Public Enemy said the same thing. Public Enemy made Chuck D. I shouldn't say Public Enemy because Public Enemy is more than one person. But Chuck D made the argument once that he couldn't make any money in the United States because nobody knew who he was. He would have to go overseas. He had to go to Europe. He would have to go to Japan or whatever. He could make a ton of money because Public Enemy was still beloved over there. But here in the United States, he's just an old guy. And this was over 10 years ago when he said this. So you get the idea that rappers like Common or Talib Kweli or No Name, who have a more poetic style, a more Afrocentric style. The same thing with Kendrick Lamar. I know people will deny it, but it's true with Kendrick Lamar. Most of their fan base is white. And the reason for that is they talk about subjects in a very poetic way. They don't do rump shaking, heavy 808s music, even though Kendrick Lamar has a lot of sponsorships, mostly because of him being the voice of Black Lives Matter. Other people like No Name, for instance, is mostly just, if you're among the black urban elite who went to college and all that kind of stuff, you probably heard of No Name. You've probably seen her before. You're probably familiar with her work. And she starts going on rampage about how, she's tired of white people coming to her shows, or she's tired of seeing scores of white people at these shows. And you're saying to yourself, why are you so limited? Why are you so resentful of people who actually like what you do? Why is that a problem? And it's a way of, I think, having an inferiority complex. It's that you feel that you're tap dancing or something like that for white people if you see mostly white people there. But you have to ask the question, is what you're doing really connecting with black people? Because black people are on something different. You're not doing bitches and hoes, pop that pussy and all that kind of stuff. That's not the kind of music you want to make. You want to do lyrically poetic stuff. Guess who's interested in that? Maybe middle-class black women, maybe some middle-class black males, somewhat. But for the most part, it's going to be white people. You know, white people are going to be very much more interested in that because it's a little bit more positive, and you know, you're a little bit more underground, so they are a lot more likely to spend the money to go see you in concert as opposed to all the black people who are rather will rather go see Gucci Man. You know, so you have these people who have been taught to basically bite the hand that feeds them. You know, and I said it before. I talked about um, the culture of whiteness, where basically you have to be self-deprecating in order to be a white fan of like hip hop nowadays. You have to basically hate yourself. You know, you because you get they shit talk you so much. You have to kind of hate yourself in order to be a fan of that shit nowadays. Bishop Marley says, I think that the argument against white people appropriating cultures comes from a real place of hurt that stems from white supremacy, but it comes across as very whiny. No, it comes across as very whiny because it's fucking whiny. The issue, look, if you want to make the argument about cultural appropriation, the argument for cultural appropriation and that it is a bad thing is that often white people will come across something that takes place in a different culture and they will find ways of monetizing it and somehow blocking other people from participating. A good example would be Taco Bell. For instance, Taco Bell is huge in the United States, um, but it's not Mexican, you know? And that's generally the idea, is that something is, white people will corner the market on something by, you know, borrowing from another culture, even though other people do the same thing. So you'll get like Eminem. Eminem gets a lot of hatred from black rap fans, even though a lot of black rappers, even Rakim, who was some by some people considered the GOAT, he gives Eminem a lot of credit for his, you know, lyrical ability and his historical knowledge of rap and stuff like that. But a lot of black rap fans look at Eminem like he's Elvis Presley. You know, he's just coming into black spaces and stealing and not giving anything back, even though he, you know, put a lot of black rappers on, most notably 50 Cent. Um, when you have sort of that position that white people are just coming to mine what you do and steal from you, which, you know, you can't really steal culture. You have to ask the question. Um, sure, there's always going to be an element of it's exotic and different. Therefore, I'm interested when it comes to white people doing black stuff, let's say, or Latin stuff, or whatever the case may be. The reverse is also true. Whenever you see black cosplayers, they get a lot of attention. You know, black people cosplaying or black goths, they get a lot of attention. You know, because it's something that you don't see every day. You don't see black dudes dressed like characters from Dragon Ball or Naruto every day. You know, maybe you stay in the hood, you might, because I know I see them quite a bit, especially since I go to like Comic Cons and stuff like that. I see them quite often. But and for other people, it's not an everyday thing. You see black cosplayers, so they're kind of like, wow, you know, black people are interested in things that are not traditionally black. It's like, yeah, because we live in, you know, the 21st century, you know, where you go on your phone and you can hear music from anywhere in the world that you want to hear music from. If you've never heard of music from Ireland before and you're from Cincinnati, you can go on YouTube, punch in Irish music, and listen to Irish music if that's what you wanted to do. But think about the effort that was put in to people in Japan in the 80s and 90s who there was no YouTube. So how are they getting hip hop records? Why would they even care to even look up that stuff? You know, but they did. You know, and cultural exchange is what actually, that's the one positive thing about globalism. I'm not really much of a globalist, but that's the one positive thing about globalism is that we learn from each other. Is that we absolutely can share experiences, we can share music, we can share entertainment, we can get kung fu movies and RZA can chop them up and put them to beats, and we get the Wu-Tang Clan and nobody said anything about cultural appropriation. You know, when you got a lot of black Muslims, even non-traditional Muslims like the Nation of Gods and Earths or the Nation of Islam, who are not traditional Muslims, a lot of those people learned about being a Muslim from Africans, specifically North Africans. The Moorish Science Temple is based off of. Every black American in the United States is really from Morocco. It's like there's nothing but Arabs in Morocco. Well, not nothing but Arabs. There's a lot of Arabs in Morocco. It's a mostly Arab state, much like Egypt, much like I think there's another country in Africa. It's slipping my mind right now, but it's very highly Muslim. But Morocco is certainly one of them. But you get this idea that we get this cultural exchange. We exchange religions. We exchange books. And from that, people gravitate towards what they like. You have a far greater world experience when you open your mind up to other things. Like, sure, it would have been nothing for a Japanese guy to write a story about a Japanese samurai who wants to do the exact same thing as Afro Samurai, but he's Japanese. I don't think this thing would have ever taken off as much as it did if he just stuck to that lane. You know? So him doing something different because he was interested in different things got his attention. Got everybody's attention. They're like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? He's drawing black people and they don't look like, huge pink lips or whatever the hell. They're not Aunt Jemimas or anything like that. It got people's attention. It would be nice if, we could have such cultural exchange and respect in the United States between each other. Lord Kratos says, there's a Japanese community who love Chicano lowrider culture. See, I don't doubt that at all. And what ends up happening is that it becomes very cool for people who are in that culture. You come to respect it. Like, it's very strange when you see, the old argument for or against posers. What was this Darby Allin when he was going at Cora Jade, calling her a poser? Two white skateboarders. Two white kids who like to skateboard. You're a poser. You don't really like to skateboard. And it's like, it doesn't, I don't care about that. But it's something that within a subculture might be an issue. But then what happens when, like, Eminem knows more about rap than most children listening to rap today? Is he not more hip hop than fucking? You could just do the list. Didn't 21 Savage not too long ago say that Nas wasn't relevant or something like that? A lot of these kids, and we talked about this before, when it comes to rap music and stuff like that, a lot of these kids only know like surface level about the industry that they work in. That's like so many of these, new actors think they're doing the first ever black sitcom when it's been done for 40 years already. You just keep trying to remake The Jeffersons or keep trying to remake Sanford and Son, acting like you're doing something new. It's like, no, you're not. They just did House Party again. It's like there's fucking 4 of those movies already. I know it's supposed to be different this time, but there's already 4 of those goddamn movies. Do something new. Do something different. But no, it's do the same thing over and over and over in a circle. And then when somebody comes along and does something different, using your quote unquote cultural idea, and they do something different, all of a sudden you're stealing from us. It's like, no, you keep doing the same shit over and over and over again. Somebody else actually wants to take this thing to the next level. I can appreciate that. I like it. I don't mind when white people doing quote unquote black stuff. I don't even know what black stuff is, because most stuff in the United States, especially in American culture, we wouldn't be able to do it without white people. If white man didn't create turntables, you wouldn't have hip hop. There weren't any guitars in Africa, right? There weren't any pianos in Africa. So no matter how people are like, white people stole jazz or the blues or whatever, I say, the blues, jazz is a style, it's a genre that we helped to create and formulate and put together, but it wouldn't exist without access to white people's musical instruments, which we did not have in Africa. There were no guitars, you know, there were no pianos. So once that meets this, we get something different. And I enjoy that. That's how humanity moves forward. You know, a lot of the sort of graffiti culture in Japan is beautiful. Their hip hop, not really much on the lyrics, but the but the music is awesome. It's that cultural exchange is very good. Ali Hankerson says, I'd argue trying new things from different cultures could lead to entertaining and unique if done correct, of course. Yes. We operate in the wrestling space, and what we see is that the Japanese took pro wrestling and mixed it with their culture of mixed martial arts, which if they didn't call it mixed martial arts, it was mostly just karate. And I think Taekwondo is Korean. Kung Fu is Japanese, not Japanese, but Chinese. But they mixed it with that, and you started getting like worked MMA and really stiff American style pro wrestling, where, you know, they have a history of doing things differently. They're going to take what you created, which is professional wrestling, and they're going to mix it with their own thing, and they create strong style, and they create King's Road, and they create all these different styles that then they kick back over to us, and now you got Puerto Rican and Irish guys like Eddie Kingston, who are huge fans of Japanese pro wrestling, you know, but pro wrestling came from the United States already, you know? So it's an interesting thing that they could take something like pro wrestling, create their own version of it, regurgitate it, and in the minds of some Americans, it's better than what the Americans do. You know, and it's the same thing with, you know, like I said, with Eminem. Eminem can go to the hip hop clubs, not be a part of quote unquote the hip hop culture because he's not black, but he's got plenty of black friends and he's having these experiences where he knows about the turntables, he's studying rappers, and he can go back to his home, do his little rhymes, chew it up, spit it out, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be like, damn, this white boy is good. He can take our stuff, do it just as good or if not better than us. You know, that bothers some people, but it shouldn't, because that's a challenge to move things forward. Like, I've never heard a white person be threatened by Rick James or Jimi Hendrix or Slash or any really good black guitarist or a black songwriter or any funk band or any. I never hear white people are like, these Negroes shouldn't be doing, you know, music with our instruments. But if you see a white boy with two turntables, you see black people are, you know, tight-assed about it. It's ridiculous. You know, it's truly ridiculous. But let's finish this up because we got some more to get into. He says, well, a lot of this was him thanking Titan Comics for creating it in a more appropriate format. So he says, and 25 years later, drawing Afro is still fun. He was originally my life's work, and the story that is now out in the world again is only a small part of Afro Samurai chronology that I created decades ago. So I want to publish more as soon as possible. This he wrote this in 2022. All right, so there was another interview he did, I believe, for a digital version of the manga. And we're going to go into that one next. But I really wanted to go into that because I love the cultural exchange aspect of it. And it's really embarrassing that we as a society today cannot have a cultural exchange without people bitching and complaining and whining and stuff. It's really sad. But, you know, it is what it is. Ali Hankerson said, they're auctioneers who are better rappers. Well, he put rapers, but I'm guessing you mean rappers. Auctioneering is not really rhyming, though. Auctioneering is, you know, it's a different kind of skill set. Bishop Marley, when someone comes and treats another's culture with care and respect, then it is accepted in my book. You would think so, but it's not. Typically, it's not. You know, because, well, in the past, it used to be. You know, there used to be, you know, a lot of respect to, you know, white people or Japanese people or whomever who came into black space and was good at something. And the reverse is also true. If a white man is not expecting a black dude to be good at something and then he is, it's like, well, holy shit, we gotta do something about this. That's the Jackie Robinson, you know, we gotta break the color barrier because this guy's fucking good, But we don't have too much of that anymore. It's like we're trying to reinstate the color barrier. You know, white people should go to Green Day concerts and black people should go to Gucci Man concerts, and the two shall not meet. You can't be fans of both. And it's sad. So this is an interview called "The Man Behind the Fro." This is from the um, electronic version of the Afro Samurai. The question was, the version of the manga that we're publishing is actually a relaunched version from your original doujinshi. How did the relaunch come about? He says it began with the Afro Samurai project from Gonzo. In the anime series, we had to have mainstream entertainment elements added for the new audience. When I saw Afro animated and voiced for the first time, it felt like he left my nest. In the manga, I focused on showcasing my original Afro Samurai. So in essence, the manga is a relaunch of the doujinshi, but the world is bigger and the settings are stronger. He was asked how long did it take for him to finish the series. He says, it took 3 years from the start of page 1 to the end of volume 2. This comes out to 300 pages of art. So a simple calculation gives me about 3 days per page. He says, and again, there are different versions. I have not read the doujinshi version. I couldn't find it. But he says the doujinshi version of Afro Samurai, the current manga version, the anime version, and the game version are all different, have slight differences from each other, but the core concept is the same. Each represents a unique world in history. Such multiple worlds coexist within the Afro Samurai universe, and I allowed the series to be that way from the beginning. So you can be sure that there are many more stories to tell in the Afro Samurai universe. So here's an interesting thing about Afro Samurai. It was actually published in traditional comic book fashion, meaning to be read from left to right, as opposed to traditional Japanese, which is right to left. So if you buy a regular manga, it is read from right to left. But Afro Samurai is from left to right, which I thought was a publishing error, but it turns out it was intended. So it says, quote, Afro Samurai was originally intended to be published as a traditional American comic book. So the pages were drawn full size, left to right. It was a challenge to follow this style, though, as even the word balloons were done horizontally, whereas typical Japanese manga text reads vertically and right to left. So this is how far he went. He challenged himself to not only create black characters, but, well, a black character, because there's not that many black characters in Afro Samurai. Shouldn't, act like it's full of them. But he wanted to create it in an American style. So he challenged himself to do it the opposite way. And think about that. He dedicated 3 years of his life to drawing in a way that is opposite his own traditional country. That's tremendous. Like, that's very cool. He says, the question, in your opinion, what is the difference between Japanese manga and American comics, and in which categories does Afro Samurai fall? Takashi says, quote, as is often pointed out, Japanese manga use a style with cinematic camera angles, which was developed by the legendary manga artist Osamu Tezuka. Each frame represents a snapshot and an action. Each line and piece of dialogue is paired with a corresponding action, and it is shown visually frame by frame. On the other hand, American comics are graphic novels. The story is there, and inspirational visuals are there, but the dialogue and visual actions are not necessarily in sync in that way. I think Afro Samurai has elements from both, and that is something not many people have done. See, he didn't really answer the question. Like, which one is it? I'd say it's more of like an American comic book. It reads a lot like an American comic book. It feels a lot like an American comic book. It doesn't. And it doesn't have traditional Japanese themes. It has sort of traditional Western themes. So this is the final piece before we start talking about the manga. It says the question is, in terms of your characters, what is it about the character of Afro that you see, that you like rather, and do you see any aspects of him in yourself? Takashi says, quote, while my characters don't directly represent my experiences or personality, they are built from my subjective imagination. Of course, I couldn't draw something I had never seen or felt or imagined, so it is possible that memories from my past influence my character expressions to some extent more than I am aware. So, of course, you can't create something you've never seen before, but his experiences are that he studied Japanese. Well, he's from Japan rather, but he studied Black American comics and stuff like that. He did an interview around the same time the anime was about to come out, where he essentially said exactly the same things about coming up with Afro Samurai by being hooked on African American music and hip hop since he was a kid. And he says he started drawing characters on Kleenex boxes. So like that's like he has such a really cool story, you know. All right, so now we're going to get into a little bit about the manga. We're going to continue. We're going to kind of bridge it a little bit because it's still going to be talking about Takashi Okazaki. When he says he was asked if he was still into hip hop, and this was in 2006, I believe. And he says, when I first listened to Public Enemy in my teens, it was truly sensational. I have to say that my English is not good enough to understand the lyrics of hip hop songs. I can read the translation, but basically I get sensual enjoyment out of the sound, like the rap on a track. My recent inclination has been to revisit the hip hop music from the 90s. So, you're talking about a guy who doesn't even really understand the music. You know? He just kind of vibes. And that's kind of how I am when I listen to like Nujabes or whatever. Even though I think there's traditional English speaking rappers, they're almost always offbeat and very soft under the beat. But that's very cool. Um, so he starts talking about if he has an afro or his involvement in the cartoon, because people are just calling it a cartoon. He says, quote, I was involved in the basic development of the storyline and the character design. I also pitched in some ideas at the script development stage. So he is not that involved in the anime. So it's an interesting situation. We're gonna come back to this as he explains like the headbands and stuff like that. But this is going to be sort of fun. So, let's see. What we have here is the anime. So, I burnt the inside of my mouth. I made some chili for dinner and I burned the inside of my mouth. It's my tongue is kind of numb and my mouth is very dry. But okay, so they announced that RZA will be doing the soundtrack for Afro Samurai in 2006 on actually June 1st, 2006. It was announced that RZA and Samuel L. Jackson and all of these characters will be involved with Afro Samurai. So here is what RZA had to say. As a fan of the martial arts and old Japanese samurai movies, I have always wanted to be a part of such creativity, and to have my own spice added is even better. Many hip-hop artists and musicians from the late 80s to now have been inspired by this form of entertainment, and today's animators have been stimulated by hip-hop. But usually, these two forms of expression never meet in the same realm of artistry. Afro Samurai offers me the opportunity to mix the innovational world of hip-hop with the visual imagination of Japanese animation. The vibe of Afro Samurai is so soulful and cool that I was asked to compose the series. My creative juices immediately reacted. I felt it was something meant for me to do. In many ways, Afro and myself share the same spirit. I don't know if it's that deep, But RZA feels like him and Afro share the same spirit. Well, not Afro, but RZA was involved with a movie called Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai. How many of you have seen that? If you haven't seen Ghost Dog, Way of the Samurai, my goodness. It stars Forrest Whitaker, right? As a black samurai living in the urban jungle. It is it's incredible and it's funny. So in May of 2005, it was announced that Samuel L. Jackson was going to be involved with Spike TV's Afro Samurai. The Spike TV's executive vice president of development and production for Spike said, quote, with Samuel L. Jackson involved with this project, combined with the talents of Gonzo, the leader in producing cutting-edge Japanese animation, and featuring a funky hip-hop soundtrack, the project was irresistible for us. Afro Samurai is already generating a great buzz for its animation and captivating storyline. At this point in time, for the record, Spike TV was in 87 million homes. It was owned by Viacom, which was an MTV network. So cable was so much stronger back then. That's just a little something. We're not going to go into any of the stuff about TV ratings or anything like that. All right, so Gonzo, the producers of Afro Samurai, they spent $1 million per episode on the show. Samuel L. Jackson starred as Afro and the quote voice in Afro's head. It's a character named Ninja, but he is essentially, he comes across like he's a voice in Afro's head, but he's not completely a voice in Afro's head. The manga, however, which I kind of jumped over, started in November of 1998 and September of 2002, and the anime started in 2007 and ended in 2008, and the movie came out in 2009. The video game, which I never played, I never saw it. I never even saw the game. I saw commercials for the game, but I never seen the game. Came out in 2007, and it came out in 2008 on PS3. So it's a pretty old game, pretty old series. All right, so let's start with the manga. So we're gonna start doing sort of a dive into the story, and the story is very damn simple. Like I said before, the story is that Afro, that's his name, because we never get his real name, so his name is just Afro. His father is killed in a challenge by the holder of the number 2 headband, a man by the name of Justice. He kills Afro's father right in front of him to collect the number 1 headband. At that point, Afro dedicates his entire life to hunting down Justice and killing him. Afro doesn't necessarily want the number 1 headband. That's just a reward for killing Justice. He wants to kill Justice. At the end of the story, at the end of the day, that's what he wants. He wants to kill Justice. Okay, so when you open up the manga and you start to read it, you start seeing about the Empty Seven clan. The Empty Seven clan are these old guys. Some of them have cyborg parts and stuff like that, and their mission is to protect number 1, being Justice. The name Justice, I don't think is ever used in the manga. I don't know where the name Justice comes from because it's not really used in the anime either. But that's their mission. The Empty Seven clan is their mission to defeat Afro Samurai, to prevent him from climbing the mountain and challenging the number 1. But there are members within the Empty Seven clan who want to betray Justice, or the number 1, and to collect the number 2 headband for themselves so that they can go and challenge the number 1. So if you're confused, there are 2 headbands. There's the number 2 headband and the number 1 headband. If you have the number 1 headband, you are essentially a god. Okay? You cannot be challenged by anyone except the holder of the number 2 headband. But if you have the number 2 headband, you can be challenged by anybody. So when we start the series at this point, Afro already has the number 2 headband. Okay? So at this point, the enemies in the book are essentially randos who want to take the number two headband and people who are trying to protect the number one, and keep Afro Samurai from trying to fight the number one. So the Empty Seven, they put a bounty on the head of a man named Shichigoro. Shichigoro and his partner used to do jobs for the Empty Seven clan, completing what was called red papers, which were basically bounties that the Empty Seven clan would put on people. Shichigoro decided to retire when his partner got injured. He had a son whose name was Kentaro or Kotaro or something like that. And they decided to go live in a small village. Afro Samurai comes around, and at first, him and Shichigoro actually starts getting along. And then Shichigoro kind of realizes that if he kills Afro, then he can lift the bounty on his own head. So he attempts to kill Afro. Of course, he gets killed, and his son actually watched it. So now you see almost immediately the 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 cycle, right? Shichigoro is a good guy, but he's challenging Afro because, well, he wants to get out from under this bounty that's on his head, and he gets killed right in front of his son. So now, similar to Afro, Shichigoro's son Kitaro has watched his father be killed right in front of him. So from there, we go into Afro is in a lot of crazy battles. There's rockets and people with guns and explosions, cyborgs, all this kind of stuff. And he gets beat down, essentially. He's just, because Afro, despite a lot of, it's very simple. He has no superpowers. Like, he's highly skilled, but he has no, like, super recuperative abilities or nothing like that. He has no cybernetic enhancements or anything. So basically, just this constant gauntlet of fighting starts to wear him down, and he is eventually falling off the mountain. So he has to be rehabbed. He starts to go and live in a small village where he didn't know it, but they worship God. And he sort of becomes very close with this young lady who is in the village. Her name is Aksa-chan. Forget what that's supposed to mean. I didn't write it down, but I think I think that's her name, is Aksa-chan. And she is basically a priestess for this new religion in this hidden village that's around the mountain. And Afro is, as he rehabs, he starts getting sort of closer with these people. And right before he decides to go, him and Aksa-chan decide to slip away. And, the villagers thinking that she's about to go, they're going to have sex or whatever. And they kind of leave him to their own devices. So Aksa-chan takes him to this temple where he finally sees the vision of God that these people have. And it is justice. It is the man with the number one headband. And Afro says, that man killed my father. I'm going to kill him. And so Aksa-chan, who is an interesting character in her own right, because she's a person who's trying to get away from her past. She sort of takes her kimono off, and underneath she's got like all these battle adornments. And she sees it as her job to protect her god. And Afro kills her. And then the people, they come into the temple and they see that Afro has killed Aksa-chan. And they're like, holy shit, Afro is evil. We ought to kill him. He ends up killing the entire village. He ends up killing everybody. And there's a beautiful shot, and I wish I could show it to you, but I'm not a really good YouTuber, of blood splattering all over the statue of Justice, the number one headband, the guy who has the number one headband. And it is an incredible shot. And you see Afro walking away from this village, and he's smoking a cigarette, and he just murdered everybody. And it's crazy. As soon as he comes out, he kind of comes across Kuma, who you've probably seen as the guy with the teddy bear head. His name is Janosuke. And we started getting into the flashbacks of After Afro's father was killed, he was found by a guy who we know as Master. And Master brings Afro into his sort of orphanage slash samurai school where Janosuke is there and a bunch of other students are there. And Afro is sort of welcomed into the fold. And he's trained for several years under them. He becomes friends with them. He becomes like brother and sister to all of these people. And Otsuru is there, and she is Afro's sort of love interest. He raised with her, and upon graduation, the master starts giving them weapons. He gives Janosuke two blades, two katanas, because that's his fighting style. And he gives Afro his father's weapon, because Afro was cradling his father's sword when Master found him. And Afro then says, look, I'm about to go and, find the number 2 headband because I want to kill the number 1 headband. That's my goal in life. That's what I want to do. And throughout this entire portion of the story, Geno, Master, so many people are telling him, you don't have to do this. Like your life right here is perfectly fine. You don't have to go through that. Just forget it. Just forget your father. Forget the past. Live with us. Otsuru wants to marry you and have your babies and all this kind of stuff. Just stay with her. And Afro's like, I can't. I can't do it. I refuse to forget about my father. So he goes off into the world in search of the number 2 headband. And in doing so, he comes across the Empty Seven clan. He's killing a bunch of people and stuff like that. He makes enemies, essentially. And throughout his run out there in the world, I think it's taken 5 years for him to go and do that and come back. He comes back and everybody's still there. Janosuke is still there. Otsuru is still there. Master is still there. But he goes to see the Master because he's heard that the Master has the number 2 headband. So since Afro was out there killing and doing everything that he was doing, he was being hunted. So the Empty Seven clan follows him back to the school where he was raised. And Afro goes to see his master. And in doing so, while he is occupied with the master and they're talking about, the importance of the number 2 headband and why he never said that he had it or anything like that. And the Empty Seven clan attacks the school and they end up essentially killing everybody. Otsuru is killed. Geno, he is a good fighter, so he sort of survives, but he comes into the room. He, is calling, Master, Afro, come help us. Nobody's coming to help because the Master, they didn't know that the Master was dead. Afro killed him and took the number 2 headband. And Janosuke sees this. He comes into the room similar to the villagers when they found that Afro had killed Oxachan earlier in the story. Geno opens the doors just in time to see Master's head on the floor. Afro is covered in blood. He's got the number 2 headband. And while his back is turned, Geno is stabbed and killed by the Empty Seven clan. Later on in the story, his body is taken and he's rebuilt into what is now called the Kuma, or a cyborg version of Geno that wears a teddy bear for head. In the story, Geno is one of sort of the mid-level bosses, where once Afro starts working his way back up the mountain after he fell off before, he's defeated the Empty Seven clan. Now he's going to go up. Geno was like right there. He's like a mid-level boss. And you see that him and Otsuru was so close, him being Afro, that she gave him a very special memento. It was actually a pick, like a hair pick. So it was like a metal hair pick or something like that. So Afro cannot defeat the Kuma. It's too strong, cybernetic, and antagonist makes Geno much more powerful. And Geno is now, of course, driven by revenge. And he wants to kill Afro because Afro killed the master. Afro abandoned them when they needed him. And everything is, his emotions are kind of like going crazy. So he gets on the verge of defeating Afro when Afro finds the pick that's in his kimono or whatever, He stabs Geno in the neck with it. Ends up killing him. So that's kind of how he survives the Geno fight. And to be quite honest, I don't think Geno returns after this. Um, no, in the manga, he doesn't return. After he's killed the second time, that's essentially it. So you still get some flashbacks later on. But Geno or Kuma, who is usually presented side by side with Afro in almost all of the art, is not really a huge part of the story. You know, he's not a huge part of the story. Like, he's important for Afro's flashbacks and stuff like that, but he's not like a repeated villain that pops up over and over again. So they move forward to another city, Baba Garaya, the city of gods. This is where number one supposedly lives. It's a hidden city in the mountains. Not yet in the mountain. At this point, we come across some higher level threats that the number one has put in place. And one of them is called Afro Droid. Afro Droid is a cyborg that is created to look just like Afro's father. And we learned that the secret history of the number one headband, it is that the person who holds the number one headband is supposed to maintain order in the world. So this is the reason why everybody wants to stop Afro so badly, is they're looking at him as an agent of chaos. That, you know, when his father, Afro's father, who doesn't have a name, has the number one headband, he sort of threw away his responsibility to protect the world or to maintain order in the world. And Justice, the new number one, he has recreated that. And it's only because Afro is so obsessed with the number one headband, or with Justice himself, not really the number one headband, that all of this chaos and all of this death is even happening. If Afro would just stop, and this is a very interesting part of the story, is that even though this guy works, you know, for the number one, he's telling Afro, like, I don't really want to kill you. I don't want to have to do this. In fact, you should join up with us. You know, you should help protect the number one. You know, like, it was your father's fault. If he would have just done his job as the number one, you know, none of this bad stuff would have happened. None of these people would be trying to kill you for revenge or any of this horrible stuff that's been happening. And Afro is just, again, tunnel vision. There's no way he's going to do anything else other than kill Justice. So this leads to the Afro droid being dumped on him. A robot version of his own father. It's too difficult for him to defeat, to be quite honest, but he powers through it. And this is an interesting piece because there's this ninja that they call him, the voice that's in Afro's head that kind of pops up every once in a while. He sacrifices himself. This is when you learn that he actually can be seen by other people, because at certain, like, he's not as active in the manga as he is in the anime. In the anime, there's too much ninja. There's way too much. But I think they just like having Sam Jackson do two different voices. But we'll talk about that in a moment. But in the manga rather, he sacrifices himself as, you know, he's supposed to be, you know, some kind of I forget what they say. He's something that, like, you know, the eyes of the universe or some shit. It's like the real high level thing. And he sort of sacrifices himself. So Afro fights off the Afro droid, and Ninja has occupied the other guys, and Afro finally gets into the chamber where he gets to fight Justice, the holder of the number one headband. And upon opening the door, it's a lot like Sasuke and Itachi from Naruto, where the moment the door opens and Afro sees Justice, he just dashes across the room and stabs him in the chest immediately, without thinking about it, without questioning it. And then you see it, and this is where the twist gets real. You see that Justice is already dead. Afro stabbed a corpse. and it turns into dust right in front of him. And he's just standing there in complete and total shock. Like, this fucking guy is already dead? And it's like, yeah, he's already dead. And I thought it was a swerve. But it's not. It's not a swerve at all. Justice is dead when Afro finds him in the manga. He's already dead. And so Afro has the number one headband, and the protectors are giving him this facetious credit, like, congratulations, new number one, you did it. You climbed the mountain, you got here, you have retrieved the number one headband. But that's not what Afro wanted. Afro wanted to kill this guy who killed his father. And we see that time passes as Afro basically sits in this chamber alone. And we can tell time has passed because now Afro has a beard in the manga. And Afro is still sulking in this room when the door opens, and there is a samurai wearing a straw hat, and he walks up to Afro, and he tells Afro he's been waiting on this for a long time. He's going to kill him. And Afro says, okay, do whatever you want to do. I got no reason to live. Do your thing. So he takes off the straw hat, and we find out it's Kotaro. It's Shichigoro's son, who Afro killed earlier in the story. And Afro essentially just surrenders and is going to let Kotaro cut his head off. So the moment Kotaro goes to cut his head off, Afro just has this instinctive reaction. He responds by getting behind the kid and cutting his head off. And the kid dies. And now Afro is still alone. And at the end, he kind of gets it in his mind that he just has to move forward. Like, now he can finally go forward. There is nothing else. He has to go live his life. And it's an incredible story. And for a lot of people, I can understand that if you're probably hearing this for the first time, you're probably saying to yourself, what a cop-out. We don't get the big battle between Justice and Afro. They built it up so much. And to be quite honest, I agree with you. But the theme of the manga is how futile vengeance is. Everybody who tries to get revenge in the Afro Samurai universe ends up failing. Everybody. Geno, aka Kuma, he tries to get revenge. He gets killed. He tries to get revenge on Afro. He gets killed. Kotaro tries to get revenge for his father. He gets killed. Afro tried to get revenge for his father, but he got embarrassed instead because Justice was already dead. So he, wasted years and years of his life, killed countless amounts of people for no fucking reason. And you realize, that's one of the themes in the story. Another one of the themes in the story is a rejection of forgiveness. Afro is a very one-dimensional character in so much as that he completely rejects the concept of forgiveness. He does not even consider for a moment not doing what he's doing. He is so dedicated to his cause that he will pass over any relationship. This is what, I believe, oh my God, I'm going to butcher the language, but I think it's called a transpersonal commitment. That is something that, the warrior archetype has. He has this transpersonal commitment to avenging his father. And it is so strong that lovers, friends, adopted family, his master, no one can talk him out of doing this. Even his enemies, nobody can talk him out of doing what he's doing. It doesn't matter what kind of bond he creates with anybody else. He is going to try to kill Justice. Period. That sort of thing makes it a very sad story, because you do see that's where the emotional elements come from. that you want Afro to have his revenge, but at what fucking cost? You know, at what cost? All of the kids he grew up with, Geno, Otsuru, Daisuke, all of the big, what they call big boy, all of those kids were killed. Afro was forced to kill his own master just so he can get revenge that didn't even occur. It's all about telling you how not just feudal revenge is, but how some people can become so fixated and so obsessed with their own trauma. He cannot get over seeing his own father be killed in front of him. He can't get over it. Another nice little theme that goes throughout the story is betrayal. You get the idea that Afro betrays people. You know, it's more circumstantial than anything. For instance, his betrayal of the orphanage of his own master or whatever. It's a circumstantial thing. You know, the master won't give him the number 2 headband, and Afro asked him for it. Please entrust it to me, I believe he said. Let me have it. And the master says, no, you can't have it. I took it for a reason. I'm keeping it with me for a reason. You cannot have it. Afro could have just said, maybe been a little bit more open, listened, and maybe all this stuff could have been nipped in the bud. But no. He saw it as the master was in his way. You got to kill him. So he did. When it comes to Aksa-chan, the woman who rehabbed his body after he got his ass kicked and thrown off that mountain, he asked her not to attack him. He says, please, don't attack me. You know, I'm going to go kill that guy because he killed my father. She's like, nope, I got to protect my god. So Afro has to kill her. He becomes friends with all these villagers. He has to kill all of them too. And it's crazy. But look at how much you can get out of something so simple. Something as simple as a story in which a guy wants revenge. You put all these obstacles in his way, but they're emotional obstacles. You know, and we're going to talk about that when we do the David Mamet questions a little bit later. But a lot of these obstacles are emotional obstacles. And it's very tight in that way. And you can actually come out of this show actually not liking Afro. More the manga. The show too, because the show is, you know, he's pretty much the same. You could walk out of that thing not really liking Afro. Or you can walk out of it actually understanding that he was put in some really shitty situations where he wants to be a good guy, but he also, you know, he's got to do this thing. It's this thing, he's just got to do it. And it's unfortunate for the people he has to kill that they're in his way. You know, he's literally a human steam bulldozer, a human train. Like if you just, you know, that's the beautiful thing about Afro Samurai is he's not bulletproof or anything like that. He literally just will not stop. His tenacity is unparalleled. Like he just keeps going. No matter how badly you beat his ass, he keeps coming forward. That is something that is admirable. So even if you don't like him as a character, because you come across like, okay, he's not really cool, he's not really funny, he's actually keeps to himself. He's not very talkative. Even in the manga, he doesn't really say that much. He lets other people talk. Other people explain everything. You know, so he just kind of sits and listens and smokes cigarettes, and that's pretty much it. And then when he needs to kill people, he does. And it's a very interesting way of writing a character because Afro is very flat. He's a very flat character. He doesn't learn anything. He doesn't really lose anything. You know? You can tell he didn't learn shit when he killed Kotaro. He didn't learn anything. His penchant for violence just continues. You know? His desire to live, you know, continues. Even though he's lost his purpose, you know, at the end of the manga, he still has his very strong will to live, which led him to kill the kid, even though he wasn't a kid, he's probably like a late teenager at the time. So the manga is fun. It has a lot of differences to the anime, which we'll talk about momentarily. But first, we got to talk about the anime. All right, so the anime is voiced by Samuel L. Jackson. He has a deeper register in his tone of voice. When he, matter of fact, let me I want to make sure that I put the time on here first. Okay, so Bishop Marley says, "You killed my father. For that, you must die." In bad English dub. Here's the interesting thing about the anime. It was made in English first. The Afro Samurai anime was made specifically for Spike TV in the United States. It was made in America first, and then it was redubbed and sent to Japan. It's only 5 episodes, but it cost $5 million to make, because it was $1 million per episode. I forget how much the movie cost, but I would imagine it was about the same amount, somewhere over the neighborhood of $1 million. So the anime starts out similar to the manga, where Afro is hunted for the number 2 headband. He's being attacked by scores of challengers, people who hope to challenge the number 1, but also people who are protective of the number 1. But it's not necessarily so many people who are protecting the number 1. That has been replaced by people who are angry with Afro because they killed members of his family. He killed, their brother or their cousin or something like that. And the Empty Seven clan, they're brought in as people with a quote mandate from heaven to retrieve the number 2 headband. So Afro, of course, carves through all of them. Episode 2, Afro has gone through like this incredible gauntlet on the mountain. He's been beat up, and he is saved by a woman named Okiku. Okiku is a spy for the Empty Seven clan. We found out that it's actually Otsuru. So in this episode, we actually started getting the flashbacks of Afro's story at the orphanage. I keep calling it an orphanage, but it's more like a samurai school in the anime. In the manga, it's more of an orphanage because every kid there is an orphan. Genosuke is an orphan. Otsuru is an orphan. All of them. That's not really a central piece of the anime. But this woman, Okiku, rehabs Afro back to health. She actually remembers her feelings for him. They began into some kind of sexual relationship in which, she remembers all the things that Afro likes. And he thinks that she looks familiar, but he's not quite sure who it is. And the story is essentially the same in the episode 2 as it is in the flashback in the manga, except for it's a little bit different. In the anime, Afro and the Master work together to fight off the Empty Seven clan, and then Afro kills the Master afterwards. And then Geno sees it, but Geno was supposed to be dead before that point. So Otsuru, who was, and it's different in the anime as well. I didn't want to talk about the differences like this. I wanted to kind of do 2 rundowns, but forget it. In the manga, Otsuru and Afro are around the same age. Okay, so she gets killed, but she's an adult in the manga. In the anime, Otsuru is a child. She's younger than Afro, so he doesn't recognize her when she gets older, and that's why they had this sort of sexual relationship. He doesn't really know who she is, but she knows who he is. We find out she's a spy for the Empty Seven clan. She ends up admitting that she was a spy, and the Empty Seven clan kills her for giving up her secret mission or whatever, and admitting that she has feelings for Afro, so she can't betray him. So the Empty Seven clan kills her, and Afro ends up cutting through all of those guys. In Afro Samurai episode 3, the Empty Seven clan introduced the Afro droid, but the Afro droid here is a clone of Afro Samurai. as opposed to in the manga where it's actually a clone of his father. So this entire episode of episode 3 is essentially Afro Samurai fighting this android version of himself. And then Kuma, who is Geno, of course, comes in at the end. Episode 4 is mostly Kuma versus Afro. We get more of the flashback about Afro actually helping Geno fight off, or Geno actually helping Afro when he was out searching for the number 2 headband and people were trying to kill him. Geno was there to help him. And this, of course, makes it stronger when Afro doesn't really do much of anything to help the school when the school is attacked by the MT7 clan later on. So that's very interesting. It's about the same thing. Episode 4, we get the MT7 clan and a bunch of bandits attack the school in order to get the number 2 headband. Master is wounded fighting off the bandits, and he decides he's going to challenge Afro anyway. And it's a little bit different in the anime because it seems like Master sort of surrenders and he just kind of allows Afro to kill him to finish the job and get the number 2 headband. At this point, Geno is severely injured, but he's still alive, and he sees Afro has killed the Master, and he's so upset that he falls off of a mountain. And this is, of course, when they rebuild him and bring him back as Kuma. Episode 5, Afro defeats Kuma. The voice in his head is sacrificed, and he ends up, quote-unquote, dying. You get more of the backstory of Geno and Utsuru here. And then you get the big battle of Afro versus Justice. And Justice is alive when Afro finds him this time. So this is a major difference, of course, because Afro is allowed to get his revenge. But this is where the story kind of wildly deviates too. Justice explains, that it's the destiny of the number 1 to control mankind, to create order, and that there are more headbands, and you have to collect all of the headbands in order to get the godly power that comes with it. So now throughout the series, even though there's only been 2, here you start seeing that there's a number 8 headband, a number 7, and all this kind of stuff, and they're all on dead people because Justice has gone around killing these guys and taking the headbands. And through the power of all of the headbands combined, he has super abilities like you can cut his head off and he can come back and that kind of shit. This is all false. This is not in the manga. In the manga, it's all a facade. Him being a god is not real. The ultimate power shit is not real. It's all just part of the mythology that's around in the number 1 headband. In the anime, it's legit. Justice is really like a god. He somehow manages to cut people's heads off with guns. I don't know how. Don't try to ask me any questions. And of course, Afro wins. He gains the number 1 headband. We find out that Geno is being rebuilt and that Justice is actually, he sort of somehow survived at the end. Of course, it doesn't mean anything because he doesn't really return. But the themes and everything is essentially the same. The rejection of forgiveness, more of a focus on the family, trauma, betrayal. The feelings of chaos and order is more in the manga than in the anime. I think that's something that the anime completely missed, is that in the manga they really wanted to get over that there is peace in these villages and nobody is dying or being killed until Afro shows up. And then Afro kind of fucks everything up. Not on purpose, but through circumstance. He, creates a shitty circumstance. So he has to do this. Sorry, I had to drink some water. Okay. So the anime is beautiful. It has great animation. The dub is very good because it was made for it. The story is even more paper thin in the anime than it is in the manga, and which led to a lot of people not really liking the show. And I understand why a lot of people don't like it. I like to compare it a lot to. I know Black Saiyan loves this. I like to compare it to Devil May Cry, where there's not a lot of lore. There's some, but there's not a lot. And the plot, at least initially, is very simple, but it's very style over substance. And the beauty of the fighting styles and the camera angles and the animation makes up for the lack of story when it comes to Afro Samurai. Again, Afro is flat. There is more comedy in the show because you got Samuel L. Jackson doing the wacky ninja voice, you know. Oh, Afro, and he's doing hip hop references like you need to go get you some booty, that just kind of, I know you're gonna tap that ass, all that kind of weird shit. Um, there's not that much of that in the manga, but there's a lot of that in the anime. uh, RZA's soundtrack is gorgeous. It is fantastic. Um, the only part I have is I felt like there was a lot missing. Like if this could have been one of those anime that could have been 12 issues or 12 episodes. Like a lot of anime make it to 12. This felt like more like an OVA. And it gives you a general idea of the manga, but it doesn't really do too much to make the manga feel like it's something that you have to read. But it definitely deviates quite a bit from the original story. So the movie came out in 2009. The movie, they continued with Samuel L. Jackson and RZA. Samuel L. Jackson did the voices. I think her name is Kelly Lou. Is it Kelly Lou? Lucy, not Lucy Lou. Kelly Hugh, I think it is. She did the voice for the main character and the villain in the movie, who is a female. It was a made-for-TV movie, so it wasn't like a theatrical release. They spent a lot of money to make a cartoon movie. It was then re-released, I believe, later that year. It was released 110 minutes, a full movie in 2009, and then it was released a little bit later on in 30-minute blocks. So 4 30-minute blocks, which is 120 minutes, which means that they added some stuff, probably flashbacks or commercials or whatever. And in the second run. So they chopped it up and put it out in 30-minute blocks a little bit later on. And it was relabeled Black Samurai Resurrection. So the movie is even simpler than everything else. There's a young lady by the name of Lady Seo who is trying to get revenge for Kuma, aka Geno, who is her literal blood brother. And we find out throughout the story that, Geno had a little sister who Afro had met. And now Geno has been killed. He's been killed twice. So now he doesn't have much left of his human body. And he's essentially a sidekick for his little sister now. He's kind of the mascot for the franchise, so he has to be there, but he's not really all that helpful. But Lady CEO wants to humiliate Afro before, she kills him. But she does, along with Geno, aka Kuma, attack Afro Samurai, defeats him, and takes the #1 headband. She then tells him that he has to basically start his mission all the way over again to go and collect the #2 to challenge her for the #1. And to give him an incentive, she steals his father's bones from his grave and is going to recreate his father, resurrect his father as an enemy against him. And it's not the best. Let's put it like that. You talk about the story just gets thinner and thinner and thinner. It's not the best. But you do get one interesting element from the movie that does not exist in anything else, and that is Afro saying essentially that he didn't want to continue this because he got his revenge. You know, he killed Justice. He didn't really care about the number one headband anyway. So it was like, well, they took it from me. I'm lucky to be alive. Fuck them. I'll just do something. But then he realizes that he couldn't live with himself if his father's remains have been misused, and he begins to go on the mission to find the number two headband. He does this by, walking around, traveling, going from place to place, and he ends up finding the number two, and it's Shichigoro, who is in the manga but not in the anime. Shichigoro has the number two headband in the movie, and he talks about it, and he's more of a baby face in the movie than he is in the anime in the manga. In the movie, he's the caretaker of Kotaro. Kotaro, of course, is the little boy. And it's based off, of course, Lone Wolf and Cub. I don't know how many of you guys ever seen Lone Wolf and Cub or read the manga series. I've been meaning to get into it, but I haven't found good versions of it to read yet. But Shichigoro says that, hey, Kotaro's father was killed by Afro at one point. But he's basically a baby. He's a kid, probably 4 or 5 years old or something like that. He doesn't really remember it. And Shichigoro is saying he just wants to keep the number two headband out of sight. You know, he's trying to maintain order, stop all of the fighting and all of the murder by holding on to the number two headband. Essentially the same role that was played by Afro's master is played by Shichigoro here. It ends up in a fight, of course, where Afro kills Shichigoro, and then you see Kotaro actually see Afro kill his who he thinks is his father, which is Shichigoro. Afro then, of course, now has the number two headband. He's going to find Lady Seo and kill her. But Lady Seo has a group of executioners. And these executioners are all cyborg versions of the kids from the orphanage where Afro was raised. So they don't really have names because this show isn't about naming people, giving people names or going into the backstory of some of the other characters that existed. But you can tell that these characters all know Afro personally, and the only way that you would know that is if you grew up with him. And, Afro ends up fighting through them. The dad droid, as I called it, to separate it from the Afro droid, the dad droid actually gets animated. It's actually animated a little early because she feels like she really needs it because the executioners were defeated. And then we can start getting some changes, start getting some interesting stuff here, because Dad Droid is too powerful. Afro cannot beat him. There's a mental block on Afro because the droid looks just like his father, and he thinks that it is. He's even though he knows that it's not, he thinks that it is. And Geno / Kuma is watching Afro get his ass kicked by this cyborg version of his father, and his remaining love for Afro kicks in, because he still has his human brain and all that kind of stuff. And he actually joins Afro in the battle and starts to help. And it's interesting because CEO's trying to talk sense into Geno, like he betrayed us, he betrayed you, yada yada yada, and it didn't quite work out. So Geno and Afro both are working together. It's not really working out. So CEO herself is going to jump in and help because she wants to protect Geno. A moment of hesitation happens, and then the dad droid ends up killing Geno and Lady CEO at the same time. And then Dad Droid now takes the number one headband because he's already defeated Afro. He didn't take Afro's headband, but he's already defeated him. He's not dead, but he's beaten. And which gives him, the authority to take the number one headband once he's killed Lady CEO. And now Afro has to kill this mirror version of his father, who he now admits is not his father. And of course, he kills him and regains the number one headband. At that point, he finds out that Kataro has been following him. But in this version, in the movie, Kataro was still a child. So Afro says, like, whenever you're ready, essentially, come find me. I didn't really like the movie that much. The movie, I don't know. I would go into the video game, but I haven't played it. So this is the three versions of the story that I've consumed. The movie is the weakest version because it's almost wholly created by some guy in a, somebody who vaguely read the manga says, "Oh, there's some characters we didn't use. Let's use those." It would have been nice if they'd used some other characters from the manga that they didn't use before, but they wanted to lean it very heavily and keep it in the same universe as the anime. And since the movie is a continuance of the anime, I guess what they did made sense. They gave some nice little closure to Geno's character where he kind of forgave Afro, and it's the only instance of real forgiveness in the entire fucking program. And it's interesting. CO dies having to trying to protect her brother. So again, somebody who tried vengeance in this universe and it didn't work out. So that's kind of, the overall of all three, the movie, the anime, and the manga. All right, more water. Now let's talk a little bit about the some of the themes, some of the overall angles. So let's break it down, a couple of archetypes and stuff like that. So Afro Samurai works off the warrior archetype, which I talked about before. It is the part of male psychology that is all about duty and responsibility and fighting, violence, being comfortable with violence. In this story, Afro is the man who is the most comfortable with violence in the entire universe. Outside of anyone else who might be a samurai, even the other samurai, they have a reason to calm down. The master has his students. Genosuke has his family. The empty seven, well, they have no reason. They're basically like Afro. Number one is, I'm number one. I don't have to do any of this stuff. Even Shichigoro, he has a reason to not engage too much into fighting because he has, Kataro with him. But Afro has nothing. He's given up everything. His only thing is the fight. So what he's going to do is fight. and that makes him, for some people, very one-dimensional, except for, of course, the fact that you put him into these incredible scenarios where he does come across like a bit of a blood-soaked psycho, even though he's more deadpan. It's not as much personality-based. So Afro in this story is a symbol of chaos also, because God equals order. And justice in this universe, at least, especially in the manga and in parts of the anime, you see that the number one headband, is supposed to have the power of a god. And Afro wants to kill him. So Afro is a member of chaos. He goes into these places that are relatively safe, where people are not too, sometimes there's random acts of violence, but there's not many. And he is just bringing havoc. Havoc follows him. Blood follows him. He's unencumbered by any type of relationship. Sentimentality, doesn't work. Afro essentially abandons humanity to become a being of pure vengeance in this story. And because he's sort of a being of pure vengeance, he is very simple. I keep saying that, but it's true. very simplistic, but he's also um, destructive. And it's very interesting to have, and it works this way. Sometimes you're the sword, sometimes you're the shield when it comes to being in the warrior archetype. Either you're the attacker or you're the defender. Um, Afro is the attacker. He's the guy, he's coming. You know, he's going to do his thing. And you see that it leads to the third thing, which is the cycle of blood. That everybody is sacrificed for revenge. He's bound by his mission. He's bound by his pride, and everybody else sort of follow suit. You know, they all have terrible fates due to Afro's cycle of blood and his desire to just be chaos and exist in this universe with this fury within him. And it really wrecks the lives of everybody else. Most other people were living in peace until they came across Afro. And that's very unfortunate because that's something that you would think when it comes to like a villain, right? You would think a villain would be the guy who will uproot, your entire village, try to attack your religion, to, you know, to not care about you, to turn his back on those who love him. You would think that would be what a villain would do. But Afro is very much the babyface here. Yes, he kills a lot of people, but he doesn't really want to. He really only wants to kill one person. Everybody else is either attacking him because they want that headband, because they're trying to protect number one, or they have some kind of issue with Afro from at some point in the past. Maybe their brother or son or something was some kind of nameless, faceless assassin who tried to kill him. And that's just Afro's entire life, is that fighting, constant battle, just constant stress. And he deals with it mostly by smoking cigarettes, which he does in every iteration. If you've seen the anime, you probably have never saw the manga or read the manga, but he doesn't drink lemonade in the manga. That's an anime only thing. But lemonade and cigarettes is usually the only two things that you see Afro actually enjoying. So outside of, he doesn't really even enjoy killing. He didn't really enjoy any of the, what you would see as successes. He didn't enjoy any of that. He's very joyless. He just has this permanent dour expression to him that makes him, in some ways, a character that's not that interesting in itself, but everything around him is so colorful, and everybody else is so motivated, and everybody else is so into it. But another thing about the movie I didn't really care about was the soundtrack. RZA did not bring his best on the soundtrack to the movie. If you watch the movie, it's 110 minutes. It is awful. The soundtrack is awful. The movie is fine. The soundtrack is not good. All right, let's do the David Mamet questions. There's 4 questions, of course. Number 1, what does your hero want? It's simple. Afro wants revenge. That's literally the end. He doesn't want the number 1 headband, as I've said before. He wants revenge. He wants to kill Justice, aka the number 1, aka God. He wants to kill that guy. But there's something to be said about God being dead in the manga, right? A guy who was worshipped as God being dead. That's a Nietzschean, concept of, God is dead, and you have to create new gods. And that's where Afro comes in. Because Afro now has, through his blood-soaked history, kind of carved up his own legend as a godlike being in this universe, replacing Justice, who was already dead up in that tower. But that's enough of that. Let's go to David Mamet question number 2. Who stands in their way? So there's a lot of people, and this is a positive thing about Afro Samurai. Because the story is so simple, the gauntlet of enemies changes and is very good. The Empty Seven clan, the various other protectors of number 1, the people of Baba Agra, the people who are involved with number one, the protectors of number one. Kuma, aka Geno, he is in the way. Um, of course, random assassins, Chichigoro, they're all in the way. But the number one thing that's in the way for Afro that he deals with a lot is his own sentimentality, friendships, relationships. His friendship with Geno, his friendship with Otsuru and the other kids at the orphanage slash school, his relationship with his master, his relationship to Geno and other characters in the series. They stand in the way, and he has to overcome all of that. He has to overcome all of his bonds that he built in order to continue chasing this horrible thing that he wants to do. And of course, the third question is, what happens if he doesn't get it? What happens if Afro Samurai does not get his revenge? Well, nothing substantial actually has occurred or on the line for Afro if he decides to quit at any point in the story and decides to settle down and have kids of his own. What changes? He still has the number 2 headband, so he's still going to be attacked by randos, but he's not going out making new enemies. He's not going to be going out killing whole villages and doing that kind of stuff. So that kind of changes if he doesn't get it. He can now live a somewhat normal life. He could even abandon being number 2 if he wanted, but it all hinges on him wanting to stop. And he doesn't want to stop. So number 4, why now? Why is this story happening now? And you realize that, and I really pondered this as I was, going through everything. And I said, this is something that Afro has been going through his entire life since his father died. There is no why now. It's always occurring. Ever since his father was killed in front of him, this story began. That's why this is happening. Why does Afro want revenge? Well, Afro wants revenge because his father was killed in front of him. Now, technically, the story really kicks off once Afro is old enough to leave his master's school. And he gets his father's sword back. Really, that's when the story starts. Because now Afro is old enough to fight on his own. He's old enough to make his own decisions. And this is a decision that he's made. And in the manga, the story really picks up once Afro is within reach of the number 1 headband. Once he's, I think he has visual on the mountain. I think the anime is the same way. That he's essentially near the mountain where the number 1 headband is when the story starts. So he's already within reach. So this is a good place to start the story, where there's scores of assassins and cyborgs and all kind of stuff trying to stop him from going up this mountain. And that's kind of it. That was our dive into Afro Samurai. It took me 1 hour and 52 minutes, much longer than I thought it would be. And I cut out a lot of stuff that I thought might weigh me down a little bit. But I still got it done. So, it's almost 10:30. Any questions? Any suggestions? Any topic changes? Let me know now. I'll give you a couple of minutes. I need to drink some water. I also need to chew up these antacids. I made some chili, and I'm kind of struggling right now with trying to stave off heartburn. You dig? Dutch what? What about Dutch? Dutch Mantel on bodybuilders are not good pro wrestlers. I haven't heard it. I would need to actually go and see his reasoning. And if it's a good video, I will either make a short about it or I'll do a video about it. But I can't comment because I haven't seen it. But I'm also not surprised Dutch Mantel said that. He's not the kind of guy who would say something like that. He just seemed like the kind of guy who would say, like, why we get all these muscle bound freaks up in this wrestling business? They don't know their assholes from their elbows. Or whatever the hell. You just feel like a guy who would say that. Let's I'll take a look at it. Is there anything else? Anything else? I'll give you a couple of more seconds before I wrap things up. Next month, we will do Kick-Ass probably. Or I'll do a similar thing that I did tonight on Afro Samurai. I'll do a similar thing with Kick-Ass where I'll look at the movie and I'll give you the background on the comic book. I'm almost done with the comic book series. I'm on book 3. I'm in the middle of book 3. By the end of the week, I should be done with the Kick-Ass book series, and then I'll just watch the 2 movies, and we'll go through that. We'll do another digging into. I just want to do these once a month, and hopefully, at some point, we'll get around to Battle Angel Alita. I want to do Attack on Titan too, but I didn't know it was this much of the manga. Jesus Christ! I just ordered like Omnibus 10 or something like that. Omnibus 11. Like, bro, I've read 3 omnibuy on Attack on Titan, and then I just started reading other stuff because it was just so much to get through. So now I got Attack on Titan omnibuy just stacking up over here on this corner, and I've still got plenty of other things to read. I'm still reading A King of Spies. I got Parasite. I got book 7 of Fist of the North Star I still haven't read. I still have Marvel Masterworks Black Panther I haven't read. I still got tons of No Guns Life that I haven't read. I still have the Doctor Strange second version of the Marvel Masterworks I have not read. I have Hell's Paradise, the first 3 manga of that I have not read. I have 2 Donald Goines novels that I have not read. I have Ragnarok. Was this number 5 or 6 that I have not read? I have more things that I have not read, and I probably don't need to buy any more books, but I am buried in books. What was better, Kick-Ass the movie or Kick-Ass in the comics? So far, I would say the comics. I would say so far. I haven't finished it though. So far, it's an interesting universe. Let's put it like that. There's a lot to learn from it. I like watching fiction to learn. It's interesting. I have 2 more volumes of Battle Angel Alita to read. Cause I've read the first 4. I got 2 more. I gave myself a break from that to actually read Afro Samurai and to begin reading Kick-Ass. I can only read so much stuff at one time, man. I'm looking at these stacks of Attack on Titan, and I'm just like, man, I want to just collect these joints and never get around to reading them. But I'm going to read them eventually. I'm going to have to get to a point where I'm just not buying stuff anymore. But I keep ordering shit. So, I don't know, man. Somebody's got to stop me. Somebody got to take my debit card from me or something like that. But I have a lot of free time, so... And I burned through traditional comic books. Like, King of Spies, I'm almost done with that already. And I just started it yesterday. And it's these thick volumes, like Battle Angel Alita and Attack on Titan end up kicking my ass. You know, because there's just so much stuff to read. And the Attack on Titan stuff is difficult to get through because I can't wield those giant bricks. Like, I carry a book bag with me everywhere I go. And unless I want to bend up the corners of the Attack on Titan omnibus, I can't take it with me. I have to read it at home. But Alita or a regular size graphic novel, I can throw it in there and not really bend it up and tear it up too much. But that Attack on Titan omnibus is so weird and it's so thick that I just can't carry it with me everywhere. So it's basically like a sit in the rocking chair in your bedroom and read this for a couple of minutes a night. It's like a textbook at that point, and I don't want it to be that way. So I just give myself a break. I'll read a volume, take a break, and then I'll come back to it, and eventually I'll be finished it. But considering that it's not all complete anyway, I'm not in a rush. So since I'm still ordering three more at least, it's not done. So I can take a break and it's okay. I'm not in a rush. Hell's Paradise is over, so there's not going to be any new issues of that. So it's going to take me a while to finally get through that. I still have a giant Usagi Yojimbo omnibus I haven't gone through either. It's just so much stuff, man. If I told you the embarrassment of, I think I did. I told you a lot about it, the embarrassment of books I haven't read. I still have a book I wanted to do a video on. It's a hip hop financial book. It's called The Big Payback: The History of Business and of Hip Hop by Dan Charnas. I wanted to do a video on this, but the book is thicker than I thought it would be. And for Christ's sake, I don't have time to read thick books. I really don't. I have these very small pocket Donald Goins novels that I wanted to read, but I haven't finished those either. I also, believe it or not, oh shit, I have two Conan the Barbarian magazines that I still haven't read. I have Alice in Wonderland, which is something that I've never read by Lewis Carroll, and I'm actually currently reading Alice in Wonderland. Going back and reading stuff like Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland is special. It's very different. Alice in Wonderland is pretty good, but it's like a double book because it's Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. So I'm still reading that. But that's just stuff I throw in my bag to read when I got downtime. Because that book was like $3. So if I tear it up or whatever, who cares? Plus the story is old as hell anyway. But I'm not familiar with Alice in Wonderland as a story. So maybe I'll, next month, if I finish Alice in Wonderland, at least the first book. Because I know there's multiple Alice books, but people only really focus on Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I'll probably find a movie or something like that, and I'll do that. And then I'll do Wizard of Oz, the movie, and the first movie, and the first volume of the book. I know there's multiple Oz books too, and I'm not going to get into those. I also have read, though, the Chronicles of Narnia. I read a lot of Chronicles of Narnia, but I've never seen the movies. So maybe I'll do that too. There's plenty of stuff we could do some digging into. I give my thoughts and opinions on not just manga and anime, but also old stories as well. So I'm going to start utilizing that. I have a lot of this stuff. I have the book Never Die Alone, and then there's the movie with DMX, Never Die Alone. Eventually I'm going to do that too, even though I love Never Die Alone. It's an excellent story. Please get that. Donald Goins is one of my favorite authors. Legit. Like legit. He makes it fun to read. And his books are not long. They're kind of repetitive, as far as, they're all about the urban experience from the 70s and 60s or whatever, but they're excellent. And they actually inspired me to read. So, I like to bring in a lot of different things. All right, y'all. 2 hours, 3 minutes. Thank you guys for your time. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. I'll check on this Dex Mantel thing and see what's up with it. And I'll talk to you guys later.